Fact checking and corrections are encouraged.
Can we get a cup of coffee in here, please?
Damn good coffee and hot.
Wake up, America. You've got a dog that needs walking. That's right, sunshine. Just put on a big pot of strong coffee and get ready to type your little hate mail with your opinions about kumbaya and flat earth insanity. Stand-up comedy? You want stand-up comedy? Well, we've got sit-down comedy. It's time for Coffee with the Dog. You make me laugh.
I don't know. Do I make you laugh? You make me laugh. Let's make each other laugh. Let's just laugh. Gotta love this band. It's almost like MTV News. I'm Kurt Loder, signing off. Oh yeah, rock that out. Oh, good morning, folks in Radio Land and live streaming internet land and wherever the hell you are. It is Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. I guess a good day to be alive, right? It's a good day to be alive, right? Am I right? Am I right? I'm right. Apparently, MTV News has signed off for the last time, and I never knew it was still a thing. I believe the last time, probably 1992 was probably the last time I caught 1 second of MTV. I think Kurt Loder was still the news guy then. But that's what's apparently they've been doing it all along, and I never knew. Well, I'm not a television guy. I'm not a pop culture guy. You know that. But I'm surprised to see Kurt Loder trending, and it's all about MTV News signing off for the last time. What do they do on MTV now? Is it music television at all? Is there any music on music television? I don't know. Anyway, today is a wonderful day to be alive. Stay away from the news. Tonight I have a show with a guy named Rob Weber, who is a comedian in Vancouver who has gone from homeless to working comedian. While I'm doing my show, CNN will be doing a town hall with a sexual predator and former president of the United States and candidate for president of the United States. And, big news, no big news. It was a civil suit that went against Donald Trump. He's not going to ever pay a dime. How do I know this? Because this is his history. I had a friend, somebody I worked for, 1985, who ended up suing Donald Trump, won a judgment for $750,000. Trump refused to pay. They put a lien on one of his properties, and he refused to pay. When my former friend died in 2006, still had not collected a penny of that money. This is his MO. And I don't know how he gets away with it, but he does get away with it. He lives on bad credit, and when he has got judgments against him, he doesn't pay them. So people who are doing a celebration dance on this, you didn't win anything. Gene Carroll is not going to see a penny of the $2 million he won. Now, people can say, well, that brands him as a sexual predator. The people who voted for him knew that. And listen, they're acting like, oh, he was railroaded, and like they don't believe the verdict. Fuck you, you fucking cult members. You knew this guy was a sexual predator his whole life. He bought Miss Teen America so he could peep on naked 15-year-old girls. Give me a break if you think he's not guilty of this. He bragged about grabbing them by the pussy, which is exactly what the claim was in this case. He grabbed her by the pussy. If you're saying he's railroaded, you're a fucking cult member and badly in need of an intervention. It's time you wake up and come out of your fucking. I understand you're a fucking Republican. You hate Democrats. You hate Joe Biden. Whatever the fuck is driving your insanity or your clinging to a cult member, a cult leader, you got to get over it. The guy's a perv. If you can't admit that, you can't admit the earth is not flat. Fucking amazing. He was railroaded. He wasn't railroaded. His own words convicted him. His own cowardice. He could have fucking showed up and testified. He was scared. Scared to face his accuser in court. And instead, he'd rather do one of these, a video, just yelling at, I never saw this woman. I don't know who she is. You know who she is. Smell your finger. You'll remember. I'm sorry. But really, cult members, get over it. I mean, I know you love Trump. I know you do. But to argue that he didn't do this and he was railroaded, fucking smack yourself in the face right now. You can't be more of a lemming cult member. You can't be. It's impossible. You are worse than the people at Jonestown drinking Kool-Aid because Papa told you to. You really are. And you know what? Go out and mix yourself some Kool-Aid today. That's all I gotta say. Yesterday, big news today. Also, George Santos, my local congressional representative, not mine personally. Lee Zeldin is still mine, unfortunately. But George Santos, the serial liar, had he got indicted by the DOJ, but we don't know why. They sealed the indictment. So nobody knows what this guy is going to be charged with or has been charged with. And I don't know why. Why would you do that? Why would you seal an indictment? Just because he's in Congress? If you or I were indicted, they would not seal it. This guy, this guy is not my kind of guy. Um, this guy is indicted for God knows what, but he's being shielded as from the public in terms of knowing what he's indicted for because he's a congressman, but he only became a congressman through fraud and deception. I think the public has a right to know. He's a Long Island congressman, and um, the people on Long Island are stupid enough to vote for him again if given the chance. And it's not about Republican or Democrat either. If he was a Democrat, it's still um, it would not make any difference. We tend to. Tim Bishop was a guy who was a Democrat who just kept getting elected over and over and over again, even though he was a corrupt motherfucker. Many, many, many terms serving in Congress until Lee Zeldin unseated him. Anyway, it's just the double standard and the two sets of justice for people who are in power and regular people. It doesn't change. You and I would get very different treatment from the DOJ. They not only would they uh, unseal the indictment, it would be like broadcast. Yeah, and it will be interesting to find out. So that was in the news yesterday. There was another big story in the news, but I'm not remembering what it was at the moment. Having a senior moment. Also yesterday, I was giving a community standards violation by TikTok for Robert Klein saying that I look like Himmler. Now, this is really baffling to me. I don't I can't imagine, and they don't tell you what community standard you broke, but the clip is just Klein saying I look like Himmler, and I say no, I'm more like Groucho Marx meets Jesse Ventura. Where's the offense in that? Somebody being reminded that Himmler existed? That's bizarre. It's not like this is a fictional character, or if somebody is that easily triggered by a memory that somebody, or a historical fact that somebody existed 75 years ago, they're a little too sensitive. They really need to change their tampon a little bit. I don't get it. I will never get it. Where we're going with this, um, it, where we're going with this is the state of Florida uh, is banning a book that was written by Billie Jean King. Billie Jean King, tennis pro, again from 50 years ago. She was engaged in what was known as the battle of sexes with Bobby Riggs, who was a guy my age who was a tennis pro, who challenged her to a match to prove that men are superior to women. Well, she was not in her prime. She was towards the end of her career, but she beat him handily. She was a lesbian, as I think that's the reason that Florida is banning her book. It was a children's book, but it was not about lesbianism. It was about tennis, and it was a children's book. They're banning it. This is where we're headed. Somebody who happened to be a lesbian wrote a book for kids, never mentioning that she was a lesbian, never saying anything about lesbianism, but because she was a lesbian, they don't want kids to have access to her book, which I don't know if it was, a good book or not. But books, and ironically, or not so ironically, 1933, what is that? 90 years ago today, the Nazi Party in Germany held their first book burning rally. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We are on a slippery slope, folks. Burning books, banning books. We are heading to a place where Carl Sagan, in his last interview, clearly described as heading back into a dark ages with cultism, conspiracy theories, ignorance being sought after. It's like it's a commodity. Ignorance is a commodity that people want in their lives. Dangerous, dangerous times. Dangerous, dangerous times. And we're slipping back in, knowing it. I mean, eyes wide open, see it coming, and we're helpless to do anything about it. So I'll be doing a show with the comedian tonight. Nobody will be watching it. Everybody will be watching an unhinged presidential candidate being moderated by an attractive woman who he probably wants to grab her by the pussy. And CNN has become Howard Stern. Anything for the ratings. Now it will get very big ratings. I mean, everybody who supports Trump will be watching CNN tonight, and even a good segment of people who hate Trump will be watching tonight. And I'll be there with Rob Weber, a comedian who went from homelessness to I don't want to say successful. I mean, I don't know how you measure success. Working comedian and supporting himself through his comedy. But nobody will be interested in that because everybody will be watching the unhinged sexual predator, former presidential candidate, lose his mind. And every question they ask him, what would you do about the debt ceiling? Well, that trial was fixed against me. The judge hated me, and the jury hated me, and they're all against Trump. Oh, what would you do about the war in Sudan? That fucking trial. They're all out to get me. Nixon, his paranoia, he wore it on his sleeve in his final days. Trump is exponentially worse and you see this in all these guys, these fucking dictator wannabes. When it comes down to brass tacks, the guys start to show their paranoia, wear it on their sleeve. And Trump is no different in that. So people will be watching. It will be a shit show. I'll be on, and nobody will be watching, and that's very sad. Or listening. But if you're on Live 365 or iHeartRadio, and you don't feel like watching a fucking insane man lose his shit, listen to me. Live 365. I'll be right back. I have a special guest for you that you might be interested in. So hang with me. So I'll be back in a moment.
Hey, yeah, mind dog, yeah, mind dog. If you ready for some action, this dog sure to keep you laughing. Let's go. Mind dog, yeah, mind dog. Don't roll, don't play fetch, only here to keep your interest. This is the show that you've been missing, full of comedians and musicians, plenty of interviews, entertaining. Keep it funny, there ain't no debating. So authentic and straight raw, pushing the limits when they talk, doing it live when they stream. Mind dog TV, yeah, so crazy, getting intense. The dogs are wild, better beware before you hop over the fence. Mind dog, yeah, mind dog. If you ready for some action, this dog sure to keep you laughing. Let's go. Mind dog, hey, mind dog. Don't roll, don't play fetch, only here to keep your interest. Let's go. Come have coffee with the dog.
You're listening to Coffee with a Dog on Live 365 Mind Dog Radio.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging through that. Got a little refresher on the coffee. My guest today was the recipient of the first ever sex change operation, but it didn't take. So he's back to try to get a refresher. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the eye-rubbing Jackie Martin to the program.
So
just
I plugged in my phone or my headphones and turned you on. I heard unhinged sexual predator, and I thought, wow, he's introducing me right away.
I wouldn't call you unhinged. You're very hinged.
I'm very hinged.
Yes. So, what do you make of it? People are acting like Donald Trump was set up in this. This is what's getting. We have a country that is in badly need of a cult intervention. Because even if you support Trump and all that stuff, to imagine that he was set up in this and he didn't grab her by the pussy when he said he loved her.
I don't do politics because it turns too many people off in bulk. But what the worst thing about it for me is I was doing something else. So when I went back to turn on the television yesterday, if they said he was convicted on all counts, or if they said he completely went free, they didn't believe a word she said. Either of those could have happened. Just the fact that either of those could have happened, I was like, what kind of place? Yeah, you're right. Like somebody from Australia or the UK should just walk in and say, what are you guys doing? You know what I mean? What the hell,
Smack him around.
The mass shootings and the Trumps and God, yeah. Thank God for jokes,
It's not even about politics for me. It's about the fact that people can with a straight face make an argument that this guy was set up as a sexual predator when we know he bought the Miss Teen pageant for to
No,
like
you
see.
don't even bother with the laundry list because it's not. You know what? You're never gonna. Somebody said, he said he could kill somebody on Park Avenue and get away with it. I think at this point he could kill somebody on Park Avenue, chop up the body, and have sex with every single one of the parts with the Pope watching, and he wouldn't get in trouble.
Yes.
So he's just going to say they set me up. I need your money. I need $5 million, and he'll get $15 million from these morons that he wouldn't spit on if he was out of breath. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Yesterday on TikTok, I got a community standards violation. It doesn't really matter to me because I don't have a following on TikTok, but I got a community standards violation for Robert Klein saying I look like Himmler. It's a short clip where just Klein tells me I look like Himmler and I'm intimidating. I said, no, more like Jesse Ventura and Groucho Marx. That's a community standard. I can't violation.
What planet? To hell with Trump and to hell with politics. How'd you have fun with Robert Klein?
A lot of fun, yeah. Two and a half hours of time with him, and he's a great guy, a really great guy. I don't even have to ask him any questions. He came on and just started talking. Like half an hour later, he said, "All right, I'll let you talk on your own show. Go ahead."
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, he's wound up.
Here's the thing that the biggest takeaway, and there were lots of takeaways from my conversation with him. Rodney Dangerfield's footprint in comedy is so friggin' big, and he's touched so many modern day comics, but his impact on comedy is so much larger than I ever knew.
It's crazy.
Right. Who's Joe Antis? Do you know Joe Antis? Do you know about him?
I have a whole history with Rodney. I don't know if you're aware of that. And,
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I remember one point Rodney called me up. He said, "You got to help me. You got to help me. I got Klein here, and all Klein wants to do is talk about his hair." So I got Rodney Dangerfield calling me because Robert Klein is there, and they're breaking each other's balls and smoking pot. Joe Antis was part of Rodney and Lenny Bruce, their whole gang, Buddy Hackett and all them. He was the guy in the group that was so funny, but would never, ever go near the stage. He was petrified. But they all talked about how funny he was. And I got to know him, a little bit. He was the guy who sat in the back of Rodney's show. You ever go to one of Rodney's live shows?
Yes.
Well, Joe was the guy like halfway through the show, 2/3 of the way through the show, when there was a lull. Joe would yell, "So what do you do for a living?" And Rodney say, "I get guys for your sister." And it was always brought that. And when I went with Rodney to Las Vegas, it was my job. So I'm sitting in the audience in the middle of the show. I yell that out, and people look at me like, how dare you heckle Rodney? But it was like, what do you do for a living? I get guys for your sister. Why don't we go in the bathroom? I'll show you how small you really are. Very funny. So Joe, I know him a little bit. And at some point, my sister just said this expression. I said, that expression is so funny. I said, I'm going to name my next album that. And the expression was, normal people are people you don't know that well.
Right.
Okay. So I was thrilled. I thought it was so great. Then before the album came out, there was an article. I have all this in my computer. I said, there was an article on Rodney in People magazine. And they're talking about him, and there's a picture of him and a picture of Joe and Robert Klein. And the very last paragraph, Robert Klein says, well, it's like Rodney's pal Joe says, the only normal people are people you don't know that well. I was so heartbroken. So I wrote Joe a note. I wrote him a letter and said, "Joe, I love that saying, normal people are people you don't know that well. Is that your quote? I was going to use that as an album title. Is it your quote? And if it is, can I use it? And if not, just tell me to go fuck myself and I'll leave it. And I'll send you the note." He wrote back a little card. "Yes, it's mine. Yes, you can use it. And go fuck yourself anyway."
Sounds like something you would write to somebody.
Exactly. He's really funny, and he was such a nice guy. And him and Rodney were freaks. And Rodney said what they used to do for fun, they would have the door just a little bit ajar, and Rodney's housekeeper, well, I forget what her name. She raised Rodney's kids, but she was a little black Haitian woman, and they would sit there with the door a little ajar on top of each other, watching her watch game shows because she thinks she was alone in the room, and scream and yell and go nuts, talking in whatever language, yelling at the screen. They said it was the best entertainment there. So that's how weird Joe Ansys was. And Klein was very tight with both of them, very tight with Rodney.
That I didn't even ask Robert about Joe Ansys. I didn't really. I forgot about him until after the program, and somebody who's a fan wrote to me and said, "You should have asked him about Joe Ansys." I said, "I forgot about Joe Ansys because he wasn't famous. Nobody knew him."
No, yeah, you gotta preface it with so much explanation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, back when people might have known who he was, nobody knew who he was, and now it's 40 years later. So it's crazy.
Yeah. Lenny Bruce is also. I was thinking about this because for me, I know obviously I was like 5 years old when Lenny Bruce was getting arrested and stuff and all that stuff, and but people talk about him like with such reverence and so like he's so important to comedy. And if I look up whatever is available online right now, it doesn't hold up. And I look at it and say, what was so great about this guy? I understood he broke down some barriers, but what was great about him? Because
It's so elusive. It was before my time too. But by the time I would have just been getting cognizant, he had already really jumped the shark. He's at the point where he's just going in and he's reading his court transcripts to his comedy audiences, and people they wanted to tar and feather him. But he was so interesting. He came out through Ted Mack's Amateur Hour, and his mother was a real stage mother, and he was an impressionist that worked straight, and he had a whole interest, just like the Beatles. He had a whole interesting thing long before he became known, and then when he started getting dirty and crazy, that he was groundbreaking because there was nobody else. He's being filthy, which is harmless, but it got him in so much trouble. But like you say, it's like, it's like telling somebody about the Marx Brothers and how great they are. But then you sit down to watch a Marx Brothers movie. If it's somebody that's never seen them before, you're just waiting for something funny because it's the whole thing.
right.
It's the whole. You got to be engulfed in it in your mind, and you could sit there and the person's like, when is this going to get fun? No, it is funny. So
Yeah.
it's a very elusive, very very elusive. Now you know that Lenny Bruce's mother gave Rodney Dangerfield his first job.
No, I did not know that.
Lenny Bruce's mother her name was Sally Marr, and she was the mistress of ceremonies at some restaurant in Brooklyn that had and Rodney, at 15 years old, she got him a job as a singing waiter. You read about Sally Marr. I'm surprised they haven't made a movie about her. By all accounts,
I got to look that up. Yeah.
Oh, what a character! I just heard about her. I don't know who. Her name just pops up. Oh yeah, and I was there with Sally Marr. Like, Jesus.
Well, Klein, like you, is an encyclopedia of comic history. But just on the Lenny Bruce thing, just a little bit more here. What gets me is so many comedians talk about Lenny Bruce. Now they're younger than me. Sometimes they're like 10 years younger than me, or even more, and they talk about him like how great he was, and like how could you even know? Because he didn't do a lot of television, right? I mean, especially after he started getting.
A lot of that is. I've heard that, so I'm repeating it. He's the greatest. It's like Jesus Christ.
Right. That's what I'm thinking.
He walked on water, pass it on. He walked on water, pass it on. Wait, did anybody actually see him walk on water? Well, don't confuse me. You know what I mean? But he was, by all accounts, he made such marks and did some really great shit. About I think the most famous story. You know who Vaughn Meader was?
Yeah.
He's a guy. He sold more comedy albums than anybody up to the time because he did The First Family, and he wasn't even a funny comedian. He just happened to sound like JFK. And he came out with The First Family album, and they could not print the albums quick enough. The people were lined up. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then JFK got shot, and Lenny Bruce had a gig like 2 weeks later, and he was like, how am I going to do this show? How am I going to open this show? And he goes out on stage, and the first thing he said was, Vaughn Meter is fucked. That's a famous story.
And he really did. I mean, his career pretty much ended with that, right?
Yeah, it stopped on a dime.
Yeah.
He spent 20 years drunk at Dangerfield's, But,
that's fun. Robert Taylor, who's been on this program, he's a funny guy out of I think he's based in South Carolina, but he's been all around. But last night he sent me a clip. He was doing a joke in a comedy club about the mall shooting over the weekend. And you talk about, somebody, how am I going to do a show 2 weeks after Kennedy he's doing jokes about
wow.
and it got a good laugh. But I was like, if you're going to do it, I guess you have to do it now because it'll be old news. There'll be another shooting tonight, and then that will be like, but people are
yeah, people used to complain when their jokes got old after a year and a half,
Right. Yeah. Now it's like a week.
No, I can't do my mamas and papas stuff anymore. You know what I
mean? That was something I was curious about with Klein because I reviewed some of his specials, and every especially had a little bit of touch on current events. No concern that material will get old pretty quick. Like, he was doing some joke about a Swedish submarine and Sweden hunting for a Russian submarine. Now, this is in the 70s or early 80s. And like, looking at it today, it's like, what the fuck is he talking about?
But he was that good that people just trusted him, and it was a little out of context. But by the time, who cares?
Yeah. And all that stuff is just it's fascinating to me to review how we got to where we are today with stand up, because he was talking about how the vaudeville clubs came back, and then there were too many of them, and then they died. It's like cyclical. It's like a very, I don't know, evolutionary process with comedy. We get lots of clubs, too many comedians for lots of clubs. Then
after a certain amount of time, I hate how old I am, but you get perspective. And I tell people, I first became aware of Rodney like in the 70s, and he was on Carson once every 3 or 4 months, and then he was on the Dean Martin show every week for a couple of years, and it would just destroy you. And after he was on, me and my buddies would call each other and spout the words, spout the jokes back and forth. It was such a holiday. And I remember in the 1970s, and I wasn't a comic or even thinking about it yet, but I always told jokes and I always liked comedy. In the 70s, if you were going around the TV dial and you saw a guy standing there doing comedy, you locked on. Just like when you're going around the TV dial, if you see The Godfather, you lock on and you watched. You just did. And by the mid 80s, if you're going around the dial and you came to a guy standing in front of a brick wall, you could not change the channel fast enough because there was so much of that crap. And it was, but I missed that whole wave where it came and then died, because by the end of the 80s, I was on the Stern Show. So that was a whole nother world that I didn't have to deal with. Right. When it came to comedy, I went to the Chicago or Denver and did my show, and it had nothing to do with the ebb and flow of the clubs, But yeah, it's a come and go and all that stuff. When you go back and read from the beginnings of vaudeville and stuff, it's all the same. Where's the stage? Where can we go work? Now we can't be dirty. Now we can be,
Yeah.
We were talking about Mae West last night. It was, all these characters came through so much stuff,
I have, had to pinch myself after the Klein interview, because he was talking about meeting Groucho Marx. And it's like, while he's talking about it, I'm not like, because I'm doing an interview, I'm not really thinking about, wait a minute, You met Groucho Marx at his house. Groucho invited you to breakfast. You spend hours at Groucho Marx's house. For me, that's Santa Claus. That's Jesus Christ. It's like Groucho fucking Marx, man.
And by all accounts, he was just a miserable old fuck. And that's one of those things I always thought I would love to have had dinner or lunch with Groucho. And I said, you know what? I wouldn't want it to spoil anything.
Yeah, well,
sometimes I think things get really spoiled.
they say don't meet your heroes, and
Yeah,
that's I was a little bit nervous about the Klein interview because he was such a fucking hero to me. I mean, not just comedically, but musically, all his talent was really just it blew me away, and I was in such awe of the guy. And I thought, if I meet him and he turns out to be a dick to me, that's gonna
yeah,
ruin.
and he can run hot and cold too, because people have the ebbs and flows of your career and whatever's happening, or somebody has a bad day. You never know. Like if somebody says hello to me on the sidewalk, and I just got done getting yelled at by somebody, and my head's someplace else. Oh hi, like oh I saw Jackie on the street. Well, he's a dick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not that big, but if somebody that big like Robert Klein, it can only throw you.
Yeah. And
But he didn't disappoint, right? I mean,
no, not at all. I mean, it was unbelievable. But there were some moments in there that he's 81 years old, and you would expect there to be some moments. Like his son called during the interview, and he picks up the phone. He goes, "Hey, Al, I'm on an iPod. iPod, that's what you call it, right?"
Right.
And I asked him about the harmonica. He said, "Oh, can I go get it?" I said, "Oh, yeah, go get it." And he just walks away, and he's gone.
It's in the glove compartment of his car.
Yeah, right. But he didn't disappoint at all. He brought out the harmonica and he played To Life, a classical, the da, 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 da. But I was like, holy shit. I mean, I didn't ask for a concert, but then he was going through the difference between classical on harmonica to blues and he even played a little bit of a German ambulance going by, all that kind of stuff. Just just a great interview. And for me, it's like it's nirvana. It really is. It's wow. Robert Klein talked to me. And now I'm 2 degrees of separation from Groucho Marx dead, Johnny Carson dead, all these people. But I feel like you know everybody in show business. Between you and some of the and Robert Klein and Jeff Altman and people like this that I've had on, I feel like I have some kind of connection to all these.
Well, it's 1 degree of separation, which is in the grand scheme of things, it's tiny.
Right.
I mean, that's 2 synapses, or whatever you call it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's fun. That's fun.
Let me switch gears for a second here. You grow pot, but do you smoke pot? Because I'm.
I don't. I smoke pot on and off, and for like the last week or two, the problem is when I smoke pot, I smoke it every day. So, that comes time to watch. Like 2 nights ago, I watched the most recent episode of Succession for the 3rd time because I sit there. And the pot nowadays is not the pot I grow is fine and it's working class pot. But now I got friends that come over and give me this crazy pot and I smoke some of it. And then I watch Succession. I have no idea what I watched. I watched it again. So finally the other night I said, I'm going to watch it and then I'll smoke pot. So I'll remember what's going because the pot is so great.
Wow.
But it's fun. But growing it is fine. I grow it for a goof. I give it to all my friends.
I know you do.
That's
buckets, why, because I never really saw you get high or any of that stuff. But I got to a point with, and here's where I'm going with this. When they legalized it, I celebrate. Yeah, it's legal in New York now, and I can go buy it. And I got into edibles. One of the Big T, who was a guest on the show, sent me edibles, and it got me totally stoned. And then I kept doing edibles. I got to the point where about 3 months ago, I could not feel a marijuana high at all, no matter how much I smoked, no matter how much I ate. I was like, I broke my tolerance.
So
And
you plateau, or it's not even plateauing. In other words, you
you
got
don't
to where
feel
it just
anything.
didn't affect you.
Yeah. And
It's like,
and so
like a heroin addict has to do heroin to feel normal.
yeah.
You know, you had to get the square A. You know.
Yeah. And so and I depend on it for my create when I'm writing music, writing for blogs or whatever I'm doing creatively. That's what keeps me going. If not, I get bored, right? So I've been for the last month. I've been chasing it, and I'm thinking like an addict, like fucking chasing it. And
Yeah,
then I finally,
you got marijuana on your back.
yeah. But then I stopped about a week and a half ago. I kind of like I can't. It's not working. I give up. And my friend Phil came over, surfer Phil, and he said I got to join. I was like, I can't get high. I got an old time. I got a guy, and I'm going to give you this guy. He's got 1970s prices on the best, way better than the legal stuff. We smoked half a joint, and
Is this your farmers market thing?
no, he's just a surfer guy, a guy I used to hang out with when we were kids, and he's 62 and he still surfs every day if he can. You know, he's a
Oh,
wave.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
but I was high for 14 hours on half a joint, and I was like, I think the medical thing, the medical, and then becoming legal was probably the worst thing that ever happened to
You
me.
know, my friend Ron, I was in the city, and I don't go to the city. I go in sporadically. Like I went in last night. Last week I went a couple times. Saw some great things I'll talk to you about. But my friend Ron says, "Come on," and I went to one of those pot stores that I really had never been in, and it's like something out of a Cheech and Chong movie. It's like every single thing is some form of pot, and the guy behind the counter is a big fan, and you have this huge plastic uh cube, like made out of plastic, and he took the top off and he held it for me to, and it was full of buds, and I took a huge whiff. It was like taking a big smell. Do you ever smell ammonia or something? Like it was
Yeah,
almost like somebody punched me in the face. And like everything in there was great. And then we walked two storefronts, and there was another one right on 8th Avenue.
I
I
know.
mean, and these things are everywhere, but it's wrecked everything because now the illegal growers are selling their pot cheaper than the legal pot. So the illegal pot trade is much bigger than it ever was. And it's all just one big shit show. You used to walk down the street in Manhattan because I worked there for so long, and you walk down the street and you smell the Greek food, and then you smell the falafel, and you smell that food, and then you smell, oh, there's the Chinese food, and all these great smells. Now you walk down the street, every time you turn around, it's a different brand of pot, and
Yeah.
it's I love secondhand smell pot, and it hits you, and you're like, where's that guy? And you look, and there's like a 4 foot tall little old lady smoking a huge joint. It's just insane. It's fun, but
You
it's
make a good point, though. That it kind of robbed Manhattan of the magic of the cultural diversity of all those great food smells. Because, and I love pot smell too, but you don't get that as much
And
anymore.
you know what? When it was so bad, a couple times on the Stern Show, I did Nutrisystem, which basically they call these things diets. It's basically you sew up your mouth and you don't eat anything and you lose weight. So you become it's like a blind man, all his other senses, from not eating. The smell of any kind of food was like, it was like torture to walk down the street, because it was like, oh, because you haven't had a piece of pizza or any, falafels or souvlaki in so long.
Were you
But yeah, and
fat?
that was,
Did you get
I,
fat?
I had a belly,
Really?
and but I wanted to lose weight for we did it for the show. I have such great stories about you don't know the story of me losing weight for. I had to deal with Nutrisystem that I had to lose 20 pounds, and I was going to get $5,000 for every 5 pounds, and it was a great deal. And they figured they got 6 months worth of, this is, the girl would come in every week. A Nutrisystem girl would come in and talk about Nutrisystem. That was part of the deal. So I started doing this diet. So she'd come in and she would weigh me. It was a whole big deal. And I had already done it once or maybe even twice, and I had lost the weight. But this time I'm 200 and I got to get to 180. So they think it's going to last forever. I'm a maniac. And I was down swimming in like April, swimming and exercising and eating this horrible tiny portions of food. And I lost 5 pounds. And then I lost, and it came down to the last time I was 185. Now I had to lose 5 more pounds. And the girl came in every Tuesday. And she was coming in on Tuesday. And I was very close to be into 180. But then as of the next Friday, we're going on vacation and we're off for 2 weeks. We're going to California for a week. No, we're going to California to broadcast for a week. And then we're on vacation for whatever it was. So this is my last chance. And I'm so close. And, and they tortured me on that show. They didn't give me the benefit of the doubt for anything. I'm so close. And the morning the girl was going to come in to weigh me, honest to God. And at the time, we're redoing the kitchen in my house. So there's electric wires hanging and it's all crazy. We got like 2 cats. And I go downstairs and I gave myself 2 enemas. I mean, I'm lying on the floor. Matt, I swear on my mother, I'm lying on the floor of my kitchen with this enema. And I got 2 cats looking at me like, what's wrong with you? And then I blast myself and then do another one. I put on a silk shirt, silk pants. I put on my shoes with no socks. And I go into the Stern show. And the girl came in. And I swear to you, the needle was exactly on 180. And I mean, if it had been a hair more, they would not have given me the benefit of the doubt. But I knew that we're going to California, staying at the 4 Seasons, anything you want to eat or drink or anything, forget about diet, and then we're going on vacation. I'm going to come home and drink all summer, so this was it. And boom. But I got to go back and look because it was like something like 6 weeks. I lost 20 pounds so fast. And, they thought they were going to have 4 months on it. I think I got 6 weeks out of me. And I got to 180. Then I got like 20 grand. And it was like, it was spectacular. But I still can see those cats looking at me lying on the ground doing enemas, I mean, I'm all alone. It's 4:30 in the morning. I'm lying on the floor of my house doing enemas.
I don't know if I've ever had an enema in my life. I really don't. If I did it, I was so young that I don't remember it.
If you did, you'd remember.
I know. Well, that's what I'm saying. It was so young that I probably don't remember.
Well, you never had a test like a barium enema or any of that stuff where they pump you and you got to hold it in?
No, I would probably kill myself just
killing yourself would be so much better.
I know.
Because you do a barium enema and you got to hold it in because if you let go, they got to start over. Oh my God. It's so funny.
I did have my stomach pumped once for drugs in Rochester Strong Memorial Hospital one time, but that's a whole other story. That is torture. Getting your stomach pumped. They
I don't even know what that means. The tube goes in your mouth. It goes in your butt. It goes.
Yeah, it's like giving a blowjob to Wilt Chamberlain.
So the tube goes all the way down to your stomach?
Yeah, and you're conscious during it. They don't put you because you're a drug guy, and so they're not going to put you out. And so you're awake during this thing, and they stick this fucking bigger than a garden hose down your throat. And
what you do? You did a whole bunch of pills or something?
They thought I did, and I could not convince them that I didn't. I had an empty bottle of pills that was prescribed to me, empty, because I put them in I was going to sell them to classmates up in school, and I had them in a baggie, and my roommate comes in, he sees I'm sleeping there with an empty bottle of pills. He calls 911. They come in, suicide attempt. They're like, no, not a suicide attempt. I didn't take these pills. Oh, yeah, right, yeah, whatever you say. And then I tried to walk away. They said, we want you to go to the hospital, and you have to volunteer. I was like, no, and I tried to walk away, and then they muscled me into
You couldn't tell them. They were in the baggie, or you just didn't want to tell them you were looking
I
to
didn't
sell them?
remember. At that point, I was so panicked and like not knowing what the hell's going on. I wake up and there's EMTs all over me and cops and stuff. I ended up going to the hospital and they pumped my stomach and found no drugs in there. And they're like, uh-oh. I think we're in trouble. We just
There is
violated
nothing.
this kid.
There's nothing like the old drugstores. When I went to Michigan State, my first senior year, which wasn't enough to get me graduated, I met this adorable sorority girl. She was a Kappa Delta, this petite, cute blonde, and I was crazy about her. And we wound up coming out to Cape Cod and falling in love. It was a whole beautiful, beautiful thing. And went back to Michigan State, and we'd go back and forth. So at some point, me and my girlfriend and her friend Susie and my friend Mike Icavelli are in her car. But we came back. In those days, Route 80 wasn't completed. So you'd zoom along, and then you go through X amount of miles in every little bodunk town in Pennsylvania, and you just want to pull your eyes out. So we went by way of Canada. So we're smoking pot. And as we got done and we got to a roach, we very fastidiously, if that's the right word, we're putting the roaches in a little bag, because we wanted to be cool about it. So we're smoking pot and putting the roaches in a bag, and we're pulling up to the goddamn entry to the U.S. in the car, and my dodo buddy Icavelli goes, "What did you guys want me to do with this bag?" And we're like, "Oh, Jesus, what?" And I got hair down, not the middle of my back, but it was really, really long, and so did he. By now, the girls are in blue. We're four hippies. We couldn't have looked guiltier. And we pull up, and they look at us, and they have us pull over. And I think they found there was barely enough pot in the roaches, because in those days you smoked it down to nothing.
Right.
Barely enough pot to make like a quarter of a joint. But of course they go through Susie's, and Susie's got some diet pills that were legal, but she had diet pills. So they're all suspicious of us. But this girl's a Kappa Delta. She's recently turned into a hippie, thanks to Jackie Martling. We're pulled over. They took the hubcaps off. They opened the hood. They took off the carb. Completely. And one of the maiden cops took my sorority girlfriend from Detroit, this little gentle angel, took her in the room and looked in her pussy with a flashlight. And the girl was, she might still be shell shocked to this day. And it was, and they let us go. They realized there was no danger here, no nothing.
Sounds like your guy was just a perv. The cop was just a perv. Like you got to be, if you have any sense at all, you're not going to store drugs there.
No, that's. So,
I shouldn't say that, because some people store it in their ass when they're coming across the border
right,
now.
and it was all brand new at the time. This was like 1970. So it was. That doesn't sound like brand, but in the grand scheme of pot and hippies, and it was crazy days, wonderful days.
Yeah. Well, you were part of any of that anti-war protest and all that kind of movement then, or no? That kind
My band, we were hippies, and Michigan State. I guess I'd have to say yes. I was.
yeah.
I would say.
I was kind of young to be considered a hippie.
You're way too young for that.
I was 11 in 1970, but I did hang out with older guys. My friends were all like 14, 15. So I mean,
but that's not like. I'm in college in 1968 and 69, and by I was a student assistant at Michigan State for social science. And what it is the university is so huge that the professor would give a lecture to like 200 or 400 people with a camera on them. And then all around the university were satellite places like classrooms with a TV. And the student assistant, which is what I was, would go in, plug in the TV, turn it to the channel, take attendance, then play the professors. And then after the professors were done, lead the discussion. And it was really fun. So I'm doing this. So it's the spring term of 70. And I'm a full-fledged hippie. And this is when it was like after the tune in, turn on, drop out. This is like, the right in the aftermath of this. And the student strike happens, and it's huge. So I'm a student assistant, but I had dropped out of college. And the professor that I worked for had no idea. And I actually went to my classroom and wrote, please do not attend classes on the blackboard, and went home. So immediately, I get reported, and he calls me up to yell at me, and he says, I can't even fire you because you're not enrolled. I can't even pay you. He's a friend. He was a nice guy, Professor Dr. Snyder. So it was so hysterical. So I go to class, I send everybody home, and I get fired from class. And my friend Russ says, hey, let's go see Woodstock. And it just come out. So we go to see Woodstock, and it's just 3 hours of, like, at the time, you're a hippie, and it's like so mind-blowing. And then the professor that had fired me a few hours earlier is having a barbecue at his house outside of East Lansing for all the student assistants. And there's like 20 of us, and I love the guy. So I get myself a 6-pack, and I'm hitchhiking to the outskirts of East Lansing, Michigan, which is a little bit in the woods, not in the woods, but in the middle of nowhere. I get a ride to the front of his subdivision, and I get out, and I pop open a beer, and I'm walking down the street with the 5-pack in the bag, drinking a beer, and a guy coming the other way in the middle of nowhere in a development pulls over. He's a cop, but he's off duty. And he comes over and grabs me and makes me get in the car, drives to a gas station. And it was one of those, he's a cop and the gas station guy, and I'm a hippie. It was like Easy Rider. They made me one by one open the beers and pour them out. And I'm thinking they're going to kill me. My friends, the gas station was right on the corner where the turn was. And my buddy Zorba, who was another one of the student assistants, sees me, and he gets out of his car and he comes over and says, is everything cool here? I said, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. And he turns around to walk away, and Zorba had an entire American flag sewn onto the ass of his blue jeans. I thought he was going to get. So, of course, the cop runs a warrant check, and I got an outstanding warrant in Ann Arbor for a loud muffler. They take me to jail. And I go to jail. I got nobody to call. I called the professor that had fired me at his home in the middle of his barbecue and said, Doc, I'm in jail. He left his barbecue to come bail me out of jail, brings me back to the barbecue, and all of a sudden I'm Arlo Guthrie that had just been to jail. So I got everybody enraptured with my story. And then I get a call my band is playing at Snyder Phillips Hall, which is half boys and half girls. They're ripping the doors off, and the boys are moving in with the girls, and the girls are moving to guys, and my band is playing in the basement. So now I'm going, and we play all night, Jefferson Airplane, dan, 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 and it was the wildest day of my entire life. I got fired. I went to Woodstock. I went to jail. It was just the craziest.
Wow.
And that was my involvement. When we're playing, but it was something you just went with. It's like if you're in Times Square New Year's Eve and everybody decides they're going this way, you just went this way. And not to mention the girls and the love and the pot and the booze and I mean we believed in it, but it was so scary. At some point, I thought we were going to wind up having shootouts with our parents.
I never spent an hour in jail in the United States. I spent about 2.5 hours in jail in Mexico once. But this weekend, I was afraid, past weekend, I was afraid that streak was going to end, and I was either going to get killed or go to jail or go to the hospital or something like that. The guy, and I think I told you about this the last time you were on, the guy who got me canceled from EPM Studios because of a Mets joke, wanted to kill me over another Mets joke. and threatened to kill me. He said he was going to come.
Mets, like in New York Mets?
Yes, the New York Mets.
He's going to kill you over.
Yeah, he's a little unstable. He threatened to come to my
You
gig.
think? You think? Maybe?
Yeah, he threatened to come to my gig to kill me. But then the day before my gig, he got he got the cops called on him for fighting with his Uber driver. And I'm starting to think, well, this guy's escalating. He might actually do this. My
What?
gig.
Stop. What did you say about the Mets?
I said the Mets. In the morning, I said the Mets are the best team ever. Then they lost that night, and I said this Mets team is the worst team ever. That's it. And the guy was like, this guy talks shit about the Mets all day long. He can't fucking. The guy was a part of, he was putting money into the studio for social media management. I had nothing to do with this guy. And he said, he can't manage a social media page for to save his life. I was like, I don't have anything to do with managing your social media. And I don't even work for the company anymore. I actually had resigned like 4
How
days.
do you get yourself involved in this crap?
I don't know. Crazy people, man. The world is full of fucking crazy people, and they're getting crazier all the time. So my gig, I was subbing for a guy, Brother Dave, who's been on this program. Brother Dave, Daisy's Nashville in Patchogue. And they put you in the window like you're a fucking monkey.
When you say subbing, you mean playing the guitar and singing?
Yeah, because it was his gig, and he had to do something, and he said, "I need a sub. Can you do this gig for me on Sunday?" Yeah, I'll do it. And Daisy's Nashville. They have house music going on. This modern country music, which sounds like rock with a southern twang on it.
Right,
And
right. That's it.
I don't play that shit.
Everything's gotten so,
Yeah. I play real country music like Hank Williams and George Jones and Waylon Jennings.
You know what? I've been getting into rap country.
Yeah, there is, and that's on the.
I was making a joke. There better not be rap country.
Oh, sure there is. There's plenty of it. Lots of it. That's what passes on country radio now. Every country song has to have a little rap section in it. Like it's not a rap song.
Kill me,
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It used to be a break where you said, "Well, I'm sorry that I ran over my mother with the train, but I was drunk." That was as much rap I wanted to hear in a country song.
They call it bro country now, and it's all about it's basically it is. It's rap. It's influenced a lot by the hip hop community, without a doubt. It's a fucking.
Hey, were you a Zebra fan?
I wasn't a fan, but I know Randy. I've opened for him. I've done, worked with him a little bit. Not. I was never a huge fan of their music, though.
They're real good guys, and they just Felix is the keyboard player, and I met those guys in the '70s. And like a week ago, we did a roast. Is Felix's wife did a roast for him, so I went and roasted him. His wife. He was her girlfriend. It was his girlfriend at the time. I met them in the studio because they locked out our studio for 2 weeks so Zebra could do an album. So I got real tight with these guys. And 25 years later, I get an email and Felix says, "Hey, this is Felix from Zebra. Do you remember me?" I'm like, "Asshole, we spent 2 weeks, in the foxhole together." Of course, he says, "Do you like Willie Nelson?" And I wrote back like, "What are you kidding?" And his future wife was my connection to Willie Nelson because she massages Willie Nelson, Woody Harrelson, the Jets, the Giants. She's this little Italian girl, Lisa Rippey, and she's amazing. And we went to see Willie, and I wound up getting tight with Willie just because of them. And they're really good characters. I thought, you take a chance because you might have said, "Oh, I used to be that roadie." Who knows?
Right.
But,
people lead to people. I bet you if I make a phone call, some of my friends were at that roast with you.
No, it wasn't a roast. It wasn't. It was his birthday, 70th birthday.
Because they're friendly with him. I know that he's been to their house every time they have a party. They have jam parties, and he's been there.
For all I know, they might have. It was family and friends, and
Yeah.
Long Island is so small. They had his dinner. The dinner and roast for Felix was at the restaurant on Jericho Turnpike, where my high school girlfriend's father took us for dinner after we graduated from high school in 1966. I'm like, I can't believe this is the same. I went up to the owner and said, I came here when it was the lamplight. He says, I was a baby when this was the
My
lamplight.
friends who always hear me talking about how huge Long Island is because they have this impression that it's just a small island off of Manhattan, and I'm always talking about how no, it's not that. To drive from one end to the other is fucking forever, and all that. And they just heard you say it's so small, they're probably thinking, "What? Dog's a fucking liar."
At Michigan, well, in Michigan, in the Midwest, they all think Long Island is just a solid hunk of blacktop,
Right,
of pavement. I'm
right.
like, I live in the most beautiful place in the world on the North Shore, but they think it's one big mall.
All right, let's talk here because you're performing in Staten Island next month. There's a new comedy club in Southampton that I'm going to be associated with called Sticks and Stones. We got to get you out there. Uh,
I would love that. This place is booked by Dino from Uncle Vinny's
Uncle
Comedy Club,
Vinny's, yeah,
and he's always coming up with these places. And it's called Max's SK.
Esca,
ES hyphen CA. But somebody wrote to me and said SK means bait.
yeah.
So I don't know if that means bait to pick up girls or bait. I
I
have
think
no
it's
idea what the.
I think it's on the water. It's kind of like a waterside
Really?
place.
I
Yeah,
didn't even look because it's far away. It's far away.
not
I
that
just
far.
started advertising because I just got done with the brokerage, and yeah, I'm still having fun doing these stupid things. I don't, people say when I'm gonna do it till the day I die. I think so. My big news Wednesday. How long ago did we talk?
Probably about 3 weeks ago, I think.
So you knew that Blue Bloods was here?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm talking to the guy on the phone today. They're interviewing me about Blue Bloods shooting at my house, and they're coming and they're going to do some pictures. I don't know whether it's the publicity end of Blue Bloods or whether they just think it's interesting. But, and people are like, do you really want pictures of your house in Newsday? I'm like, the whole world, there were millions of people that knew where I was when I was on the Stern Show. Like, do I care really?
And your house is all over film and television now. I mean,
Yeah. So, did I tell you about, I told you about the chairs, right?
no.
So they come to shoot and they look outside my bedroom, and I have a deck, an upper deck, looking out at the water. And I have this old teak 4 chairs and a table that Nancy and I had for years before we even got married. One of the first things we bought, beautiful teak, very heavy because of the wind and everything. And we didn't even live on the water. But here it is 40 years later, and I never took it in out of the rain. It's so decrepit. And they said, Jackie, I don't know if we could really have that. Do you want us to get rid of that for you? And it was, I have so much trouble throwing crap away.
Yeah.
And here's my opportunity for them to take the table. I don't have to carry it to the curb and second guess it and carry, they're just going to make it disappear. I was like, yes, but you know what? Leave the chairs because they're still so substantial. They're so well built. So they put the chairs in the back of my property, got rid of the table, and brought in a table, 4 chairs, 2 Adirondack chairs, and a small table for between them. They all have cushions, and they're like, you know what? It's a season finale. We're not going to store this crap. So you guys can just keep this. It's not 12 grand worth, but it's probably 5 grand worth. It's not top of the line, but it's real good quality stuff. They came and shot. They never wound up shooting from the deck or on the deck. They shot that scene on the beach, sitting in the old teak chairs. So I got all brand new deck furniture, and they never even used it, which is
I
just so fun,
I think I saw the picture of them sitting on the beach in the chair.
Yeah,
And,
that's
yeah.
the old chairs.
So this interview they're doing, is that going to be for a magazine? What's it going to, like a television?
No, I'm sorry, it's Newsday. It's Newsday.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which I love because everybody, I don't read it, but
And,
everybody reads that.
and that's today they're coming?
Yeah, I don't know when it's going to run, but May 19th is the season finale, starring Jokeland.
Wow. It's pretty cool. And how did they find out? I mean, are you listed in some kind of like houses to
Yeah, but
shoot at?
they it's word of mouth. This is the fourth show that shot at my house. But Oyster Bay and this area, you always see signs that they're shooting, all the different. Royal Pains was all done in Oyster Bay, and Black, whatever the show is with what's his face. They shoot so many of these. That was an old red.
Whatever the show is with what's his
That
face.
that's the old Red Fox joke. Did you ever hear that? The two black guys meet in the street. Guys, hey man, did you hear about what's his face? Oh yeah, I heard that he with her and they got to they went to they and yeah and they got and it was a while and then after a while you heard the story already? And the other guy says, yeah, but I didn't hear the details till I spoke to you. Which is what I just did. The black, what is it? Blacksmith, black.
That's so weird. I was talking about Red Fox in terms of Lenny Bruce because my parents let me listen to Red Fox at a very. They had a ton of Red Fox albums, everything.
Yeah, I had him all so dirty. He was so dirty.
But I never. Because somebody brought up Lenny Bruce on vinyl. I was like, I didn't. My parents had every friggin' comedy record that ever came out, but nothing by Lenny Bruce. But as a young kid, Red Fox. I can't believe in those times that was even permitted. You know what I mean?
But it wasn't. Those albums were so underground. It was like Bell Barth and Pearl Williams. They were under the counter. You had to know the guy that owned the record store to buy that stuff. Unless you were in the African American neighborhoods. They sold the story of Red Fox and his records. That's a whole interesting. Where did I? You can find the stories, and they're amazing.
Yeah, an album called "Wash Your Ass" was actually
that was the new one that was actually put out by CBS or somebody like that with an actual picture of him with the donkey. You got to wash your ass.
Wait, you just said donkey
or mule, whatever.
They were busting my balls about how I pronounced donkey.
You told me this already. I still don't get it. Donkey.
I was saying donkey, and they were saying, no, why do you say donkey? That's how I always pronounce it, because done, Done, is done, right?
Go crazy. I got tortured my whole life for saying washing machine.
Washing.
Do I say that wrong?
I say it the same way you say it. It's a Long Island thing, I think.
Washing machine. And there were a couple of things. I'm like, but that's how I hear it, and that's how I say it. Washington. No, it's Washington. It's not Washington. It's Washington.
Right. Klein. We're talking about albums. Klein was talking when he was at Second City, and I forget who he said it was. It wasn't Gilda. Somebody had a tape recorder there, and he got the idea. Oh, I should bring a tape recorder and tape my sets. And I know you had the same kind of thing at East Side or wherever you started doing your albums. But he was talking about dragging a 75-pound TIAC reel to reel to gigs. When you were doing that, were you dragging a reel to reel?
No, there was no East Side Comedy Club. This was at the Cinnamon, which was the corner of 25A and 110, the restaurant upstairs. It was Fast Eddie's. It had a bunch of different names. I don't know what it is now, but it's still a restaurant. And it was owned by Jerry Cooney's brother and another guy. And that's where we started comedy on Long Island. And I had a guitar amp and 2 speakers and a microphone, and I'd play my guitar, and I would do gigs like at Daisy's Nashville. You know what I mean? Play my guitar and tell my dick jokes and have a merry old time. And then when we got the opportunity to do this at Cinnamon, I was the guy. I had the amplifier and the speaker and the microphone, and I would end the show with 30 minutes, 40 minutes of guitar and jokes. So we put on the whole thing. And I had worked at a recording studio after we did the Pot song there. They hired me. And so I worked at a recording studio in Douglaston, and I learned that any idiot can have an album. If you want to have an album, it's like baking a cake. You need a master tape. You need a few pictures. You need a few dollars. You need something to write on the outside, and you shake them up and put them in the oven. And you got an album. Now nobody knows that. So after a couple of weeks at Cinnamon, I'm ending the shows and I'm killing. And I went home and I said to my girlfriend, I really should put out an album. And she said, "What are you looking at me? Don't tell me." But I had always recorded my shows with the band on cassette. So I had a Nakamichi cassette player. And I took the Nakamichi cassette player, and the guys at the studio had put in, most people wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. They put in a female XLR in the side of my Fender Vibra amplifier and wired it to the input so I could put a low impedance microphone right into it without having to use one of those long goddamn adapters that always wind up getting broken off. So I plugged right into the side, and I took I took the feed from the vocal mic, went into the left side of the cassette player, and I had two audience mics hanging there, and I wired them together, and they went into the right side of the cassette player. So my entire album, the first two albums, were done on cassette.
Cassette, holy
and
crap.
not even fast cassette, regular Nakamichi, good quality cassette player. And I take it home and transfer the cassettes to reel, and I would ride up the audience, on the laughs. And people say, "You're pumping the audience." I said, "I'm not pumping the audience. What I'm doing is I'm pulling down the audience when I'm talking so it doesn't get lost in the ambience, and then cut it up and, invented the way I did it was I borrowed $100 from 15 different people. And that's the money I used to put out the album. I gave them all a piece of stock. You own 1/15 of Jackie Martling's first comedy album, that's still worth not even the paper it's on.
It was like, oh, you were like the inspiration for Indiegogo, where people, what they do now, when they crowdfund stuff to get their productions done.
Right. But my crowd fund was knocking on the door and say, "Hey, Ma, hey, Aunt Janet, hey, Katie, hey, Vinny, and it was, I'll tell you, going into Manhattan with my car and picking up my first 1,000 albums. If there ever was you died and went to heaven, I'm driving home from Manhattan with 1,000 of my comedy records in the and then I sold them after my gigs, and it was unheard of in those days.
I know,
unheard of. So I'm in comedy 6 months, and I have my own album, and the guys are making fun of me and breaking my balls because I'm standing by the door selling my albums for $5, and I'm autographing them, and people blah blah blah. And one day somebody goes, "Wait a minute, we made $50 a piece tonight, and Jackie's going home with an extra $75 because he sold a couple of his stupid albums. Maybe he's not that stupid." And next thing you know, 20 years later, you can't leave a comedy club without people barraging you with the crap they're selling.
Well, yeah. Here's the problem, and I think this is people should be doing that because listen, if the comedy clubs aren't going to pay you, you have to support yourself somewhere. You have to make some money on this. But guys are bringing CDs now, and I saw this at the brokerage last time I was there. The opening guy, the opener, had CDs, and then people are looking at him like, "I don't have a fucking CD player."
They don't even have them in cars. I got so much stuff. I actually thought of loading all my albums and all my David Feldman filthy phone calls onto a little thumb drive.
A thumb drive, yeah.
And selling those and maybe putting it inside my book. And,
That's what I was going with that. Like, so the people who were bringing CDs, wise up. I mean, and it's part of technology changes. And if you're bringing CDs, you're not selling any.
Do you know how many CDs I have? Because we sold everything mail order. And when I left the show, the mail order business stopped, but they had so much stock. I have so many cartons of cassettes. I had cassettes of all my albums, CDs of all my albums. I have so much of that crap. I keep, I'm hoping they're going to come back like vinyl records,
Well, the funny thing about vinyl is I just read an article the other day. 90% of people who are buying vinyl right now don't have anything to play it on.
Of course they don't. That's.
It's just like a collector's item, really. But
Did you know those people? I don't know if you were old enough to know those people that were out of their minds that had these ridiculous sound systems,
yeah,
and they would play a record that had nothing on it, so they could make sure they were hearing pure silence. I mean, these people, they were it, but meanwhile they play something that would sound great.
Herman's Berry, Flip Wilson album starts with "We're recording this silence so that every time you listen, it will be different."
I, you know what, Henny Youngman actually put out an album that was 2 albums. Depending where you drop the needle, you heard it completely, because there were 2. A record is one groove.
Right.
It's one continuous groove, and he had 2 side by side grooves. So if you put it down one time, you'd hear all these jokes. And if you put it down, somehow, if it hooked into the second one, it was just some gimmick. I just remember so well.
Was he an inspiration to you? Because there is the
Well,
one liners.
I loved him. And I always tell people it's so funny because it's just like the Honeymooners. When you first see the Honeymooners when you're a kid, or hear Henny Youngman, it's all right, and it gets better. The older you get, and you go into relationships and you get married, Henny Youngman and the Honeymooners get funnier and funnier and funnier. I actually lived in my life 2 Henny Youngman jokes, and I had my 516-922 wine. I created that joke line to promote the comedy show that me and Richie had just started. There was no comedy on Long Island. We started this show at this place, Cinnamon, where I recorded my first record. And they gave us the green light. And I said, what are we going to do to get people there? I said, you know what I'll do? I'll get a joke. I'll get a phone line, and I'll put jokes on it. And then in between the jokes, I'll say, hey, come to Cinnamon to see the comedy show. Basic television, radio, a little bit of program, a little bit of advertising, right? So I did that. Henny Youngman's grandson, it might have been a nephew, but I think it was his grandson, Larry, had a bad heroin problem, and it was a mess. And Henny was doing everything he could to try and help this guy. And it was funny because a few years later, I got to know him because for about a summer, I hosted the shows at the bitter end. But for 2 years, it was called The Other End, because Paul Colby sold it and some guy opened it under a different name, and then Colby got it back. But when it was The Other End, I'm hosting shows, and Mark Simone, who I still call into his show all the time because we way predate Trump and red and blue and everything. He just came to see my shows, so it'd be my future ex-wife and Mark Simone and the MC from Dangerfield, whose name was David Copperfield, but then he had to change his name back to his original name, David Heenan, because there wound up being a David Copperfield that got a little bit more famous.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was Simone and David Copperfield and Larry, whatever his name was, Henny's grandson, and me. But Larry was having trouble. Henny used to do a thing. I don't know where he'd advertise it. Send me $1, I'll send you jokes. And you send him $1, and he send you back a page of jokes. So they get all this mail at his apartment in Manhattan. Larry and his friends would go over and rip open the envelopes and take all the dollars and buy heroin. So he's a maniac. So Henny Youngman finds out that I got my own dial joke, because he was doing dial joke for the city, and which I wound up doing a little bit too. But he thought, wow, this guy's got a dial joke. Maybe my grandson could do that, thinking to maybe put him in business or something. So at any rate, I got a phone call. And the first time I ever ate at the Friars Club was with Henny Youngman. And it was it was like pinch me. I'm dying and going to heaven. And we go and we sit in the main table underneath, the logo. And we're sitting there, and he's 6'6". He's a monster. Showbiz is so funny because everybody's the same size.
Right. It's always surprising to me.
And then you see Werner Wolf, and he's 3'6". And you see these other guys, and they're 2 feet tall, just like in the movies. But then you see Henny Youngman, who looks the same as them. He's 6'6". It's like, Jesus Christ, where'd this guy come? So we're sitting and we're about to order lunch, and we're sitting there, and he's, that's his whole shtick, the complaining and being a, angry old Jew and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, "What happened to our waiter?" And I said, "It's been downhill since high school." He says, "You're very funny." I said, "Well, that's why we're here, And it turned out there was nothing I could do for Larry, but, and I wrote a letter to him about how I could get started. I actually have a letter from Henny Youngman on his stationery that it's a big violin. That, like the
Right.
background, it's which of course you cherish.
That's people would freak out to see a comedian playing a violin on stage right now. That I forgot that was his main shtick. He was always, and he would never play it until like play like a couple of notes when he was done with this. But today that kind of act would never. I don't
My
know.
girlfriend Barbara Klein and her partner Tom and Jegno own Omnipop talent, and Tom has recently signed a girl who I think she did Fallon. Yeah, she
Yeah,
did
I've
Fallon.
asked her to be on the show, and she said
She
she
does.
would.
She plays the cello
Yeah.
and does jokes, but she's not only incredible. She makes her living playing in orchestras, and she's so funny and she's so talented. And why didn't she do your show?
I don't know. Tom said she wasn't that busy. I'll definitely get her on the show. This is like, and I was like 6 times I've had to remind him now. Oh yeah, yeah.
I'll ask him. I'll say, don't be a dick.
No, she said she would do it, but and then it was always a matter of, yeah, I'll get back to you with the date, and never did. This
I
is
tell people I do your show, and they say, "Well, is anybody listening to it?" I said, "I've never asked them because I don't want to know if they're not." But you got
yeah,
listeners, right?
yeah. We have quite a few more listeners than viewers, but the numbers are growing. And here's the thing. I'm not a ratings guy like Howard. So for me, I want to book guests that really, that I want to talk to. Robert Klein, you, people like that. But the audience is always telling me you got to get,
Yeah, somebody who's got a big social media presence. If I hear that expression again, oh,
right.
get this guy, get that guy. There's so many people, no.
Yeah.
They say same thing with our, and our podcast is actually starting to get some ground. Stand Up Memories, standupmemories.com. But like you, so many more people are listening than watching.
Right.
They just told me that. But it's if you're not doing it for the fun, you're crazy.
Yeah. So far, I mean, since I started this thing, I have 120 million streams. 120. I just got those numbers the other day, and I was like,
now
holy.
that's the amount of people that have downloaded it and
Have listened to it. Well, usually on like Spotify or Apple, they listen to it. They don't download it and keep the MP3 file. They listen to it as a stream.
I don't know. I told you, I'm sure at one point, and I don't know why it happened. One of my jokes on TikTok, I haven't looked in a long time, but it had 1.1 million views.
Right.
And it was a great joke, but it wasn't, I couldn't even tell you what it was now. But it was a very dirty joke that I couldn't believe I got away with.
You know what I'm finding out with the short ones? I could have a comedian on, but if he's sitting there like you're sitting there, people don't get that it's comedy, and so they won't click on it. But if you're standing in front of the brick wall with a microphone like this in the thumbnail, that will get 1,000 more views than
because people will stop. Yeah.
1,000 times more views than anything.
So I got to tell you this before I forget. So we had Tommy Chong on the show.
How?
And
wait, did he come into the studio?
No, on I don't know. Somehow,
yeah, he streamed him in.
Somebody got him, but he's always promoting stuff. And
Zin got him, and I got him for Zin. But that's a whole other story. Let's not talk about that. Go ahead.
But we will get to that. But I had 2 interactions with Tommy Chong. Was in the movie Potluck that I was in, which we somewhere got to screen that sometime because it's so silly and so crazy and so fun. And the whole world is in this stupid movie. Frank Gorshin and but Tommy Chong wound up in it, and Do you know who David Peel was?
Oh yeah, he just died recently, like in the
Yeah,
last 6 months.
David Peel on the Lower East Side. Yeah, he became a very, very good friend. And also Tommy Chong, Cheech and Chong got back together for 5 seconds, and they were on the Howard Stern Channel 9 show for our Christmas show. And our Christmas show, Howard Stern was Mary sitting on top of a donkey, and Joseph, Cheech and Chong were Joseph, and the manger, the animals in the manger were a donkey, a goat, and an Italian guy that was an organ grinder with his monkey. That was that was the animals in the manger, and the baby was our producer Dan Foreman under a whole bed of hay, so you just saw his head with his glasses on, and the body of a baby of a doll. So it was so, I can't believe it aired. And I said, "Do you remember that, Tom?" He says, "What do you mean? Do I remember that? What are you out of your mind?" But we're talking, and we got talking about Red Fox, because Chong's been around forever and ever, and he was friends with him. I said, Red Fox Red didn't tell me, but a friend of his told me his favorite joke in the world. And I said, I got to tell it to you. And Tommy says, all right. I said, Red Fox's favorite joke was, did you hear about the Polish gangster? His career is managed by 3 black singers. And he threw back his head. He laughed so, but it's such an inside, stupid show business joke, but it was just hysterical.
Yeah, no,
That's so inside,
Tommy has been on the show probably 6 or 8 times or something. But I want to get, because he's in business now with Cheech again and doing dispensaries and stuff. And I definitely want to
and
get
he has his sleep well oil and stuff like that. So
yeah. But mornings are tough for him. He's in LA, and this is a tough thing. So you want to pre-tape it. I hate pre-taping this stuff. I like doing it live. I mean,
yeah, no, for whatever reason, right?
yeah,
even if it's we have no choice. But I just pretend that we're going out live,
yeah.
In my mind. I don't even like the Zoom, I like to be there it's a different animal when you're with the people,
No doubt about it. And that's the only reason I really started working at that studio that I was working for, was because they had a cool podcast studio, and I thought I would commandeer that. But again, that would, everybody I talk to, I'll send a car for you to come out to Long Island. I'm not coming out to Ronkonkoma, Long Island. I'll come to New York City.
I gotta ask you a question.
All right. I'm in trouble.
Keep talking. No, because I got to tell you about. I meet the strangest.
What do you mean?
Tell me if you ever heard of this studio. Oh no! Oh God! Oh, I hate my life. I hate my world.
Is it in Ronkonkoma?
I met this guy. Omnipop, Barbara Klein.
Wow, look at you with the Rolodex with Omnipop and Robert Klein in there.
Oh, do you know? Oh, I can't read it. Oh shit! Do you know this studio? Lantern Sound Recording.
Yeah.
You do know of that?
Yes, I haven't been there, but I know of it. Yes. Why, are you doing something there?
I got an email from a guy, and he said, Jackie, I've been listening to your book. I love it. It's so great. He says, I'm in the Kingston Trio. They're the second wave of the Kingston Trio that had been assigned by the original guy.
You sure it's not a third or fourth wave?
he replaced one of the replacements. So he's a kid. He's 55 years old.
Right.
But he says, I'm touring singing fucking Tom Dooley, but I'm making a living, And I said, 1959, I actually bought the 45 RPM Charlie from the MTA. Would you have any idea what that is?
Yeah.
Well, did he ever return? No, you're right. So I love this. I couldn't believe I'm talking to this guy. And I told him this great story. But he said he records at this place on Long Island called Lantern. Now, I had never heard of it. And I sent it to my girlfriend who's, books bands and everything. She hadn't heard of it either.
Yeah, recording studios are coming back, even though everybody has the ability to kind of buy their own home recording studio that can produce really, radio friendly, radio quality stuff.
But
Recording
but
studios,
when all is said and done, it's like going out to eat. You can make a hamburger, but it's so nice to go in and have somebody else at the controls so you can think about what you're doing,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and definitely, and also the fact that because you're right. I mean, it's like that you don't have to do the engineering and you just record, concentrate on the performance. That makes a whole difference in
It's
how
a
it.
whole completely different animal.
Yeah.
Completely different animal.
Who's the biggest? Who's the biggest? And not biggest, but made the biggest impact. I know you've met everybody in show business, but any one like particular that is like your great. Oh, I can't believe I'm meeting this person type of.
You know that happens so often, but then it started happening so much.
You got
You
numb to
know,
it.
I mean, I remember the only Beatle. Paul McCartney came on the show not long after, but a couple months after I left, which broke my heart. But Ringo came on the show, and Howard said, Ringo, Jackie here. He says, he's been working with me for so long, and he said nothing I do impresses him. And he said, Jackie, I got a Beatle in the studio. Are you impressed? I said, okay. Oh, he said, Ringo, say good morning to Jackie. He said, good morning, Jackie. He said, now are you? I said, all right, Howard, you win. I'm impressed. But the truth is, I wasn't doing a backflip, but I was thrilled. But there's different varies of stuff, like James Taylor came in and sat knees to knees and sang like 4 songs. But it wasn't, hey, James, how you doing? I'm Jackie. Howard never introduced people and made it comfortable. The only way I got to know people is by finagling.
It seemed like Howard was working against that completely, like didn't want you to be kind of.
No, no. Well, I told you the stuff that I don't know if I ever told you what I pulled. I used to have Grillo go and
Yeah,
get the contact information or the names. I'm not talking about the notes. This is the actual. So I would get the addresses or the managers of these celebrities and send them all my Jackie CDs and tapes and all this crap. And the next time they came on, they had no idea that they had never met me. I
right.
mean, they had sat in a guest chair. So they come in like Roger Daltrey walks in and says, "Hi, Howard. Hi, Jackie." And Howard's like, how does he know? But Daltrey loved the shit that I said. I mean, Clarence Clemens came in. Hey, Jackie, how you doing? Hi, Clarence. And Howard's scratching his head. And I get up to take a leak during commercial. And I come back, and Howard's sitting there with his arms folded. And he goes, yeah, Clarence is telling me how in Mill Valley, when they're done playing and the audience leaves, the musicians all sit around and listen to your stupid CDs. And Clarence like, yeah, Jackie, you're the funniest motherfucker. You're so good. And you could see the steam coming out of Howard's ears because he never even introduced me to. I did that with Diamond Dave, with Willie, all these guys,
Right.
Because
That's it.
all they don't like me. The musicians love the dirty jokes, but of
Right.
course they do.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you mentioned James Taylor because Robert Klein said that was the guy out of all the people he's met in show business, that's the one guy he would like to meet and hasn't met. And I'm thinking, how can I make this as a payback to Robert Klein for doing my show? How can I get? Because I do have. I have met James Taylor. He probably wouldn't remember me, but I have connections to him, and I could probably somehow just arrange for Robert Klein to meet his idol. That would be cool for me.
I mean, it couldn't be more exciting because I didn't just meet him. I'm split. The studio's so small. I'm sitting here, and he's sitting to my right at 45-degree angle. So our knees are just about banging. He's playing Carolina on my mind and Fire and Rain, and we're banging knees, and he's singing live. And meanwhile, I'm writing insults for Howard, like James, when you wrote Fire and Rain, did you bang your head against the padded cell to keep time? Lines like that. And I'm like, oh, but there are a lot of pinch me moments like Dom DeLuise and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
Leslie West, I couldn't believe I'm meeting Leslie West, and then he becomes a pal. Joe Walsh, all these guys. They
Right.
became
Yeah.
part of the landscape.
Yeah. Now, again, and I don't want to, the Howard stuff gets old, but where he is now, he's gone totally Hollywood. Like, the people that he has now, and I don't listen to him, and I didn't listen to him when you were on because I was doing my own show at the time. So, and I did not like that people always called me a Stern wannabe. That would fucking drive me nuts. But
Yeah, you're
from
on
what,
the radio trying to be funny and trying to be outrageous. You know,
yeah, yeah, it's
it's
like
like in the old days with comedy. People, what are you doing? It was my idea to do Star Wars bits.
uh,
No, it's an open field. Jesus Christ.
Comedy Carousel says, Jackie, I grew up listening to you, so as trivial as being on the same show as you might be in reality, I'd be a liar if I said it didn't mean something to me. But you should John, come on and meet Jackie personally right here in a window. That's what you should do. You're gonna hang out for a
Sure.
few more minutes. Let me send John a link so he can come on and say hello to you. Make his day. How about that?
I'm good with anything. I
All
always
right,
have been.
John, hold on. I'm gonna send you a link to your give me 1 second here. Get the wrong thing. I'm on the wrong browser.
So while you're figuring out, I got to tell you, this guy, Buddy Woodward, is now in the Kingston Trio, and I told him the greatest story. Do you ever work, or have you ever heard of the Cape Cod Melody Tent?
No.
Well, it was like Westbury Music Fair. It was a huge tent in Cape Cod, and I got booked there. And I think the guy Tony, I think he only had half of it open because it was so huge. And I had a great show there on a Friday night. Nancy was with me. I have a great time. And he says to me, "Hey, do you like the Everly Brothers?" I'm like, "You got to be kidding!" I grew up, in Boy Scout camp. I'm listening to Everly Brothers. And he said, "Well, they're here tomorrow night. Why don't you be my guest?" I'm like, "We'd like," and he paid for another hotel night. He's a real good guy. So the Everly Brothers are there the next night. The opening act was the Kingston Trio. Okay. And it was a whole thing. The Everly Brothers had matching buses. They were exactly the same, except on the back of one was a scroll that said Don, and the other one has a scroll that said Phil. When they performed, they came from opposite sides of the stage. They never spoke. They came out, bowed to each other, sang unfucking believably for an hour and 15 minutes, and turned around and marched to their buses. All right. The Kingston Trio's on. One of them is 400 pounds, and he's sitting in a chair. And he says, I'm the only one of us left. Here's our newest guy, Charlie. He's 68. One of these things. The guys, I mean, they've been around since 1957, right? So one of them is still alive. So they're playing the songs, and in between songs, the big fat guy is telling jokes. And he's telling the exact same jokes that I had told on that stage the night before. And Nancy was pissing herself. She goes, "That's one. That's two." I think he got up to like 10 jokes. Great jokes. And I got a couple great ones from him. It was so funny.
Was he writing them down? Was he come to your show to write them down?
No, they're just jokes going
Oh,
around. They're
okay.
just classic jokes. But it was so funny, and they were different, just different, and because jokes get all muddled and passed around. I just love that. It's so fun, just
Yeah.
so fun.
Klein did his first 5 minutes on on this program about the Stooges, and that surprised me that he was a Stooges fan because you don't think of Robert Klein in slapstick. He's kind of an intellectual kind of comedian and all that stuff.
But funny is funny.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you go in and out with them. Like you like them, and then what's the point of this? And then it's just so insane, and just like the Marx Brothers. It's just like a whole thing. You just digest it and laugh, and it's just crazy,
Yeah.
And then you hear that Curly was a pussy hound, and those things just don't compute. They just don't compute. Not for
All right,
me.
you Curly. There were two Curly, right? There was Curly and Curly Joe.
Curly
And
Joe was Curly Joe was, I think, of one of the brothers, and Shemp was a cousin, and then Curly Joe Dorita was from another planet. I don't know who.
yeah.
But Curly died early. He had a heart attack or something.
Yeah, I think it's stroke, according to client. He was one. He called him a rounder. He said, and I don't know if you're familiar with that term, rounder.
No.
He's a guy who just went around to clubs and performed, not getting paid. Just went there like was just cutting up in the room. He would pull the tablecloth out from the stuff and then pay for everything he booked because everything would break. It wouldn't be a magic trick. It would fuck everything up. But he said he would just go around to every club in town and do that, like and I called them rounders. I was like, I never heard that term before.
Well, you
But
know what he was doing.
yeah, what?
He
What do
was
you mean?
meeting chicks.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
He's
yeah.
showing up and being an idiot and getting laid. That's what he
Right,
was doing.
right, yeah, yeah.
It's follow the money, unless it's somebody in show business. It's follow the pussy and the money. You know what I mean? And that's hard to wrap your head around.
What the hell? Somebody sending me a text message. No, this is about another television opportunity for me, ladies and gentlemen. People all of a sudden want me on television. Uh, I don't know.
Well, congratulations.
I don't want to. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I don't have any real show business aspirations at this point. I'm like too old. Like, and here's the thing, because I wanted to talk to you about this. I'm getting so many young comedians, or not young comedians, people who have been in the game for a short amount of time, who get these wild dreams about what it means to make it, and they all want to be Dave Chappelle, Louis C.K. They all want to be superstars, rich and famous. They don't really care about being
The,
funny.
the whole concept of being in front of people and making them laugh is a means to an end, as
Right,
opposed to being the end. It
right,
should be make people laugh and have a good time, and hopefully the money will follow.
right,
When I started doing my jokes on stage, because I didn't have anything. I knew I couldn't make a penny as a musician, and all I had was my jokes. The choice was like Biden and Trump. You know what I mean? All I had was my jokes, but my other option was to get a job, and that just was not going to happen. So let me tell these jokes on stage until I can figure something else out.
right.
But
The
yeah,
big
I don't even know what it means. What is success now? When I was on the Stern Show, like slowly but surely, each of my friends they'd get a sitcom. Like Richard Jenny got a sitcom, and I was like, my God, Jenny's got a sitcom. And then 6 months later, it's canceled, and he's back in. I mean, he wound up being the funniest guy of all time, but this is way back in the early '90s, and like Mendez, whatever his name is, John Mendoza, he gets a sitcom. They're all getting sitcoms, but then they do it and then they're gone, so they're back in the clubs, and but they had the time, and it comes and goes. But if you're not in it for the love of it, you got no shot. I mean, you're like movie stars that have a big hit, and then it's like, what happened to them?
yeah,
But they're still doing theater. When I was dating this very young girl that was in a play, a Neil Simon play, and in the play, her father was played by Bill Macy. And I'd go to see her in the play, and we go to Joe Allen's afterwards and hanging out with Bill Macy. First time I met him, I couldn't believe I'm with Maud's husband. And I'm like, he says, what do you do? I said, I'm a comic, but it's like 1980. I said, I'm a comic, but